My name is Joseph Juhn. I've been a steering committee member at KSC for the past 6 years. I'm actually a pinch hitter for Sang. Sang Lee, he's the president of KSC. He had an urgent business trip a few days ago. He called me up, and I'm here. So if any of you guys came to see Sang, this is a good time to leave because he's not going to be here. But I also happen to feel uniquely qualified to moderate this panel because I also quit my job 2 years ago to pursue my own passion, for which I have a lot of regrets. Um, and I'm only half joking, and here's our speaker.
Yay.
Can we welcome him with an applause? Yeah.
I think you need to get mic up.
So while he's getting mic'd up, let me do a proper introduction of both of our speakers. I think, yeah. So we'll start with Celina. Celina is a career coach, podcast host, a lawyer, and is passionate about helping people to pursue their dreams and live a life doing what they love. Related to that, she first coaches many professionals on their career development and has given speeches all around the world. She also does podcasts, Live Your Dream with Celina Lee, where she interviews inspirational people from various industries. The podcast has listeners from over 80 countries around the world. Yeah. Finally, she's a founder of Give One Dream. It's a global movement that inspires people to pursue and achieve their own dreams. Celina started her career as an investment banker at Merrill Lynch and worked as a corporate lawyer at a law firm called Ropes and Gray, one of the top law firms. And while she was a lawyer, I believe, she wrote a book. She was an author of a book called 꿈을 이뤄드립니다, which is an award-winning book. It's a collection of stories of people who overcame failures to achieve success in diverse industries. So she received her degree at MIT, undergraduate, and she went to UC Berkeley for law school. She's a certified professional coach and is a graduate of the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching. So in summary, she's a dream child of every Korean parent, to say the least. Now, Robert Lee. Nice
Sorry
to meet
again
you.
for being delayed.
No, not a problem. He's a Gates Millennium Scholar who graduated cum laude from New York University. At NYU, Robert worked in a student club that delivered leftover dining hall food to homeless shelters. After graduating, Robert worked at JP Morgan Chase before resigning to continue his passion of helping the hungry and reducing food waste by working full-time at Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. So Robert has been honored as a CNN hero and Forbes 30 Under 30 for social entrepreneurship, and NYC Food Policy 40 Under 40, and Youth Action Net Fellow. So let's welcome both speakers with a warm round of applause. So before we get into more intimate questions, I want to start off by asking a brutally honest question, and you have to be brutally honest too, okay?
Sounds good.
So, are you absolutely certain that you're happier now with your life than your previous job, corporate jobs? Yes, maybe, depends, or no?
I want to say 100% resounding yes, for me at least.
Okay.
But I could go on and elaborate, but
Yeah, we'll come back to
Sounds
that.
good.
Okay. And you, Celina?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
There must be
No
something.
comparison.
Wow.
not
Okay.
that that's an endorsement to quit your job. But
Right. We'll talk about that too.
Okay. Now, let me pick your brain because I'm trying to figure that out myself. For me, it's actually depends because in certain aspects of your life, certainly it's rewarding. You feel empowered to do something you find meaningful. But on the other hand, you also have to sacrifice a lot, right?
Right.
Whether it's social life, relationship, financial rewards. So we'll come back to that question. But why don't we start with your early childhood? And maybe you can share a couple of the instances that shaped you into who you are in your upbringing. So for Celina, I would like you to talk until the point of Ropes and Gray. And for you, JP Morgan. Okay?
Sounds good.
Cool. You want to take a stab?
Sure. So I was born in LA, And my family grew up in Southern California until I was 3 years old. And then I actually moved back to Korea. Well, actually, I guess I went for the first time when I was 3 years old. And then I finished my elementary school in Korea and then came back to Southern California when I was in seventh grade. So I actually didn't learn English until I was like 13 or something. So it was really hard transitioning into like the American culture. I got bullied all the time. I talked about this on my podcast. It was not an easy transition. And I remember like back then being Korean American or speaking Korean wasn't like a very cool thing to do like it has become. So it wasn't really fun being Korean American or being fluent in Korean. And then later on, I realized it was actually a huge asset because now I get to write a book in Korean and have, I guess, people who support my work. I think growing up, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like, when I remember one of my very early childhood dreams was to write a book. I had no idea what type of a book I wanted. I just wanted a book with my name on it. And that was just like, I've always been a big reader and I thought, oh, it would be so cool if I can just like one day grow up and write a book. And that was my very first early childhood dream. And other than that, I think I just grew up being told this story that as long as you work hard and to go to the best school that you can and get the best job that you can, then somehow I would end up being happy and successful. So I did the very best that I could to get into the best college that I can and then get a job as an investment banker. And then I went to law school and then became a corporate lawyer at a big law firm in New York City. And it was actually a really shocking moment for me because I felt like I had finally made it. I thought my ultimate destination was to work at a big law firm in New York City. And I've always been focused on like the short-term goals, right? What's next, right? And then I had finally arrived to what I thought I had wanted to be all my life, which was work at a big law firm in corporate, as a corporate lawyer. I was working in a fancy office, had a secretary, all those things. And I felt so empty. And I felt like I won the race, but I was in the wrong race. Like no one told me that before you start running in the race, you have to think about what race you want to sign up for. And how is it that nobody told me that? So it was very ironic because externally everything looked great. I was, had this job and the title and then the schools that, my parents were proud of me. But inside, I was like more unfulfilled than ever. I no longer had the short-term goal to distract me from thinking about like who I am and what I wanted to be. So that's when I thought, I remember like being really like sad and not like I'm a very happy person, but kind of a little bit depressed. And then my dad was like, no one can get you out of the situation. I'll be supportive, but you have to do whatever it takes. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do whatever. Like I no longer had to do things to get a better job or, boost my resume to get into better school, right? So for the first time in my life, I gave myself permission to do the things that brought me joy, even though it had nothing to do with my career and my job. Because I was done with all of that, right? So I was like, I don't even know what industry, because I had worked as an investment banker before becoming a lawyer. So I did that. And then I became a corporate lawyer. And then I was like, I don't like either of them. I hate both.
How many years did you work as an investment banker?
I was in an analyst program for 2 years. And then I went to law school at UC Berkeley. Then I was at
Did you went to law school? Did you go to law school because you wanted to become a lawyer at some point, or just as any young professionals go through, they have?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of several different factors. I think, one of them was when I was at MIT. MIT really encouraged undergraduate students to do a lot of research with professors, and one of the professors I worked with, he did a lot of research regarding technology and law, and that was kind of an exposure to that. And he always encouraged me to go to law school. So that was one factor. But I didn't know it at the time, but I'm sure, legal career being like this profession, one of few approved profession in the Korean community, I'm sure that played a factor too, right?
Sure.
So I think that's what it was. So I thought I was going to go to law school in college, and then there were, like back then, investment banking was really hot. Anyone who could get a job why don't you? And I did, and I hated it.
You hated it.
Yeah, I think it wasn't the work so much. The work was okay. The work was fine, but it's just that I think the type of people it attracts, it tends to attract very aggressive, greedy. I know some of my friends work in investment banking, but I'm sure you'll agree with me.
Yeah.
Not everyone, not every single of them, but I think it tends to attract a certain type of people.
Sure.
And now that I've, over the years, I've gotten to know myself a lot better, that I am complete opposite of someone who would thrive in that kind of environment. I'm a natural, I'm the happiest when I'm helping people and encouraging them and listening to them. I had so many stories and experiences, even as a child, when it was very, very apparent, that was my gift. Even like the story of how I got into MIT, it was like odds were very much against me, but it was that thing, I think, that got me, so many opportunities in life. So, but I ignored all of it because I listened to the societal voice of who I thought I should be and what the path was, an approved or acceptable path. And then it took doing all of that to realize that's not what I want. And then I just had to have the courage to just go after what I want.
So you worked 2 years in Wall Street.
Yeah. Well, so I started working in Hong Kong office because my grandmother passed away. So I relocated to Asia. Yeah.
But you did work in New York for a little bit.
Yeah. We did training and all of that, and then I was in New York for a while, and then moved to Hong Kong.
But graduating from law school, coming back to New York, did you fear that you might run into similar type of people in the profession, or did some of the past experiences come back to you, and you were reluctant to maybe jump straight into practicing law at a corporate setting?
Right, for sure. I think in terms of legal practice, I don't think it's being a lawyer that I hated. I think it was a type of law that I practiced. So I did private equity work. So same thing with investment banking and corporate law. I think what I didn't enjoy was that I worked incredibly hard, sometimes pull all-nighters. But essentially, I was making very wealthy people wealthier, making really rich people richer. And I was like, how is that adding to the world, right? But to answer your question, it was very easy for me to get a job as a corporate lawyer because I had the investment banking experience, right? And actually, I was talking to my mom about this the other day. When I was in law school, I felt very grateful to have received lots of offers from big law firms because not everybody does. And I felt very, very lucky and grateful. But if I didn't, I think it might have pushed me into a different direction. I think I may have gone into maybe human rights law or women's law. Then I think I would have really enjoyed it and found it to be fulfilling. Maybe I would have made no money, but I think I would have stayed. So from that experience, I learned something that's happening to you, just because it's a good thing, doesn't necessarily mean it's actually a good thing. And if something bad happens to you, that's actually not a bad thing. You don't know that until much, much later.
Sure.
So, but I think I was more careful with what types of law firm I chose. So actually my law firm was great, but it was still a law, a corporate law. You still have to bill hours. And I think fundamentally I wasn't sure. I was sure that that's not how I wanted to spend my time. I didn't see myself being at this legal work for 20 years and I'm still close to people that I work there but I didn't want to be like my boss.
Sure.
That's when I knew that I had to leave. Yeah.
Hopefully your boss is not listening to this.
He's okay. He knows all of it.
Cool. We'll come back to your story because I do want to ask you about maybe the guidance and the type of teachings that you received from your parents.
Yes.
Throughout the course of your many transitions. But Robert, please also share with us your childhood. But one thing that really struck with me, I was watching the RCN promotion video, and you talked significantly about the type of impact that your parents had as you were growing up that ultimately led to the transition that you made. But please, take it away.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I was born here in New York, in Queens. And pretty much lived in Queens all my life, really. Still live in Queens. And my parents were Korean immigrants who didn't really know the language. My dad was a civil engineer, and my mom was a teller, a bank teller. But when they came here, they just couldn't find jobs that matched what they kind of knew. And my dad ended up being a supermarket manager, and my mom became a homemaker. And I had an older brother, and both of us basically kind of grew up in this environment where we thought it was normal, but essentially there were times when we just ate one bowl of ramyeon and that's it for the entire day. And we kind of went to school and saw other kids just like throwing out like carrots and like things that they just didn't want to eat, and we were just like, what's going on? Like, why are you throwing out this food? And growing up like that, I think we didn't really again think it was not normal. We just kind of thought that was the way of life and that's how everyone lived life, and so we didn't think they were like we were out of the ordinary or anything like that. As typical kind of Korean parents would do, kind of pushed us in the direction of education to kind of break out of that kind of cycle. And I was lucky enough to go to Stuyvesant, where I was, great at math, which was really key to kind of getting a Gates Millennium Scholarship that allowed me to go to NYU for free. At NYU, that was when I came across a club that brought leftover dining hall food to homeless shelters, like you described, and it kind of, I think it resonated on me in terms of my personal background and kind of what I've kind of seen in terms of wanting to rescue food on my own, and then seeing how this club was able to actually like formalize it and do it in a bigger and more formal way, kind of made me realize that I wanted to help in whatever small way I could. And so I joined that club. As a freshman, I joined the executive committee of the club and asked like a ton of different questions that they probably thought were really annoying. But I was like asking them stupid questions like, "Oh, why don't you work on weekends? Why don't you work at all the dining halls?" Like the arrogant person I was. But essentially, like it kind of helped me really get engaged with this really grassroots solution around food rescue, and made me basically kind of steer away from kind of what I thought my career kind of aspirations were, which was I went to NYU Stern, and so everyone was kind of pushed towards investment banking, and for me personally, I wanted to make a ton of money, so my parents wouldn't want to go through the same things, and obviously they sacrificed a ton to be here, so I wanted to kind of make up for that. But this club really kind of brought me into this space of food rescue and learning a lot about food, like, City Harvest and the food bank and how they operate, and really kind of combining the elements of education in the finance world and the business aspect and applying that to the nonprofit space, where really not a lot is kind of formalized in terms of actual organizational structures and incentive models and kind of monetary incentives. So
Can you share with us? Can you walk us through how that process works? Not
Sure.
with your current company, but back in the day with the club.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was very grassroots. We
Yeah.
were doing everything by hand and manually. We used Google spreadsheets to basically get people kind of engaged in the organization, and then we would just go to a dining hall when it closed at 9:30, and then we would just walk it with our bare hands, with the aluminum tins, and just walk it over to a homeless shelter called the New York City Rescue Mission. So it was like right on NYU campus, walk straight down Broadway to 90 Lafayette, and it was kind of a really easy way for us to kind of see the impact immediately, because you would see the cafeteria, the dining hall about to throw out the food, and then you would see the line of people and the people at the front desk and people at the homeless shelter actually eating the food. So I mean, that evolved over time, and we realized that we could do this not just at NYU, but also create a business model around it to make sure that the food donor partners can get financial incentives and allow for this to be a more organically growing, but also recession-proof nonprofit organization that allows us to kind of make the universal standard food rescue rather than the exception.
Sure. And during the whole time, and until you got that employment letter from JP Morgan, did you have in your mind that at some point you want to turn this into an entity or some sort of business idea?
Not at all.
Not at all.
I was always focused on kind of my finance career and making as much money as possible. When I was talking to my professors about Two Birds, One Stone, which is the club that brought leftover dining hall food to homeless shelters, the advice that I got from all my mentors, everyone, all the professors, my parents, was always, go into a corporate career, make a ton of money, make a lot of connections, build your foundation, build your base, and then, be like Bill Gates and like give your money away at the end. And so that's kind of what I always kind of thought I would do. And it kind of evolved over time. And I became more and more passionate about it, and made it more real through the education that I received at NYU Stern, and also like learnings from JP Morgan.
Okay, and so please go on. You received an employment letter from JP Morgan.
Yeah.
And
I interned at a lot of different places because I was interested in a lot of different things, from small for-profit companies like Betterfly.com, which is like no one has ever heard of because it's tiny. It's a startup that got bought out, but worked at UBS Financial Services, and then finally kind of landed at JP Morgan in asset management. And I just really kind of was interested in kind of smaller models and kind of high growth organizations and companies. And so I wanted to kind of learn asset management and really learn how companies or how large companies choose their portfolio of smaller companies that get investments. And so ended up getting a summer offer in my junior year, and finally started thinking about what my life would be like after college, which is probably way too late. So in senior year, I realized I wouldn't be doing anything like I was doing at Two Birds, One Stone after I graduated. And it kind of made me really realize that without that piece, I wouldn't feel almost whole, and I would be missing something. And so ended up spending my entire senior year just trying to create Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, and which, by the way, was a name that we kind of tacked on there as a temporary measure and ended up being permanent. So, I think as we kind of grew and expanded, we realized that we needed a part-time or at least a full-time person, and ended up kind of going for taking the risk and going for it.
I see. So Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan, and Ropes and Gray, these are some of the best corporations, inarguably, where you can work in New York, and obviously places where if you're typical Korean parents would like their sons and daughters to work in. Tell us about that triggering point where you make that firm decision. This is not my life. I want to pursue something more. Earlier you mentioned briefly about you wanted to give yourself a little time to go venture on your own. Did that happen while you're still working as a lawyer, or did you just cold turkey quit? And then,
So I was working in-house when I decided to write my book. Being as an investment banker or corporate lawyer at a big law firm, there's just no time to do anything. So I had left Ropes and Gray to go in-house at another firm. And I've always been more interested in the business side of the work. So I made sure that was an opportunity that would give me that kind of experience. And then it was at a point where like I felt like I've done everything right, but my life felt so wrong that I was just going to do whatever. So, and for the first time in my life, I gave myself permission to do the things that brought me joy, even if it had nothing to do with my job. Up until that point, I think I was always doing things like, oh, is it going to help me get into a better college or get a better job? But I was done with all of that. So and I think it was very interesting because like when I opened myself up to different opportunities, I started to I started to see different opportunities that I otherwise would have never seen.
Sure.
I was sort of randomly invited to host a talk show for Korean American Broadcasting Television, which no longer exists. Hopefully I didn't make that go bankrupt. But this is before Netflix days when people actually watched cable channel to watch Korean dramas and stuff like that. So I hosted a talk show, and I had no experience, but for some reason, I was a guest on one of the show, and then the company called me the next day. They're like, would you be interested in hosting a show? I'm like, really? Me? Like, I don't have any experience or background. Like, why would you think that I would be the right person? And they're like, why don't you try? Because I was at a point in my life where I was just going to do whatever it takes. It's like, okay, so I did that, and it was so fun. So I would and it was really interesting because up until that point, I was always surrounded by people like me, right? All my friends were either in finance or corporate law. They went to very similar schools, had very similar life experiences, work experiences. So I thought it was my fate to be miserable at work. It's like that was like the reason why you get paid. And when I started to meet other people who are incredibly successful in other industries and actually like really love what they did, and they were incredibly successful at it, and they like really like they were so happy. I was like, oh my God, this is like possible. So then I thought, and I've always knew that I wanted to write a book one day. And then that's when it clicked. I was like, oh, maybe I could write a book about interviewing people. I've always knew that I wanted to write a book and have a book with my name on it. I didn't know what type of a book. And that talk show led me to give me an idea for the book. So I was still working as a lawyer, but I was like every weekend and at night, like I disappeared for like a year. Some of my friends thought I was not in New York anymore. And I worked on my book, and then it got published. My mom was so against it. She thought I was crazy. She's like, who do you think you are to think that you could write a book? You only went to elementary school in Korea. People who get their PhDs in Korea don't write books. It's like, 아무나 책 쓰는 거 아니다. 네 할 일이나 잘해라. And I got into so many fights with my mom, and like, I was so hurt because she was like, I thought like everybody can laugh at my dream, but you're my mother. You should be supportive of my dream. And she's like, I really don't think you can do it. And then I was like, I would cry and I would get into fights with her. And then my sister on the other hand was really, really supportive. And she's like, you're going to prove mom wrong. You're going to do this. So every night I would, I have two things that I do every night before I go to sleep. I think of 3 things that I'm like really grateful for that day. It could be like totally random, like maybe the subway came on time or the coffee tasted good or whatever. It just puts you in a good mood, because when you're trying to go to bed, it's like when you worry a lot. And then I visualized my book at a big bookstore. I had not even written the book yet. And I didn't know what it would look like or what it would be called. But I would vaguely see the image at a big bookstore in Korea. I would also imagine myself giving a talk in front of groups of audience like this, like sharing my experience of how I made my dream happen. And then every day, because I was doing that, I think I was really motivated to make it a reality. So like the next day I would wake up and like take action, like email people and try to find publishers, and all these like magical things happen. Like I really experienced from that, from me pursuing my childhood dream of writing a book, that if you really like believe that you can make your dream happen, and you take action to make it a reality, like so many amazing things happen. It's like the universe or like stars align, and you start to meet all these people, and people come your way. Kind of like if you are in the market to buy like a red car, you all of a sudden start to see red cars everywhere, right? But were they never there before? No, they were always there, but you weren't paying attention, right? But once I said I'm going to write a book, I started to see all these opportunities, and like my mom also said, like, who's going to publish your book? That's never going to happen for you. And then I ended up meeting a very famous author. That's like a long story. And I just like told her like, this is my dream. And she put me in touch with her publisher. My book got published by one of the best publishers in the country, and all these things. And then
tell us about the book very briefly. Yeah.
Oh yes, so it's called 꿈을 이뤄드립니다. It was actually published like 7 years ago, so long ago. I interviewed 9 successful Korean Americans in 9 different industries. My biggest question then and still now is, how do people figure out what they want to do with their life? Like, I don't know. Like, we don't learn that, right? Like, when you're young, your teacher gives you homework. You have to take this test and do all these things. But there's no blueprint for how to figure out your life or your career. And certainly no one told me that. So I was very interested in hearing from people who are not just successful by the societal measures, financially successful, hold certain titles at certain companies, but they were very incredibly fulfilled and happy and doing the work that they believe is meaningful. And how did they figure out that's what they wanted to do? So I got rejected more times trying to write this book than I had ever been up until that point. But I like stalk people. I would like, show up at events, like people that I wanted to interview. I would like call them for months. I would like email them. And then eventually they all said yes. And I asked them like, there were some of them that were very, very famous. And
Can
eventually,
you give us names? Yeah.
Yeah. So Howard Koh, who was the assistant secretary for health, he's a professor at Harvard now, and he's from the very famous Koh family. So his brother's Harold Koh. So he was really tough because he was working at the government at the time. So like the story as to how I got him to say yes to being interviewed in my book is like another story. But that was incredibly difficult just to get him to be interviewed by me. But again, if you really believe it's going to happen, you can make it happen. Dennis Hong, who's a very famous robot scientist, he's a professor at UCLA. I think he's like a celebrity in Korea. I also interviewed him on my podcast. Chef Hooney Kim, who quit med school to become a chef, he should actually be here. I interviewed him for my book, and then also on my podcast. So so I just kind of reached out to people, and then that's when I learned that you really can make your dreams happen. And the funny thing is, after my book got published, it did very well. All of a sudden my life changed. I was a person who was now invited to the press interviews. I was invited to give talks at so many different places. And then my mom started to brag to her friends. And then I was like, you don't even have any bragging rights. You're not supportive of my dream. And then
Would you say she's a tiger parent?
No, she really wasn't. She's actually a very supportive and loving mom in all other aspects. But she's also very realistic, She didn't think that she's like, maybe you could write a book in English, but not in Korean. Like, who do you think you are? Because I only went to 6th grade, right? It's like, no one writes a book like that. But I believed that I could. And then so she just started bragging it. And then I asked her, like, why were you so against it? And for the first time in her life, she apologized to me. And she's a very proud woman. She'll never apologize. She said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I really didn't think you could do it. So I was trying to protect you from getting hurt. So that's when I learned parents actually don't want the best for you. Like their role is, as a parent, is to protect you from getting hurt. So from their point of view, if the road that you're about to embark on has a high chance of failure, because they need to protect you, they're going to do whatever it takes for you to discourage you from doing that. And then, so wow, like I'm so glad that I didn't listen to her. So now she lets me kind of do whatever I want. And couple of years ago, I was at Tribeca Film Festival, and this very famous filmmaker, Spike Lee, was talking about how parents kill more dreams than anybody. I was like, what? That's my mom. I was like, I guess not just in Korean families, but so I think including parents, if somebody around you, especially, it can be incredibly hurtful when your loved ones, your family, your friends say no to your dream and say you can't do something. You have to really carefully consider, like, is it really true? And they all have their agendas as to why, they think that you couldn't or shouldn't do it. Also, I think that when some people say you can't do something, oftentimes a lot of people are projecting their insecurities onto you. So what they're usually actually saying is, if I were you, I wouldn't be able to do that. But they're not you. So they don't know what you're capable of. We don't even know what we're capable of until we try. I had no idea I was a person who was capable of writing a book, starting a movement, starting a podcast until I tried it.
So would it be fair to say that writing a book and publishing it and it being out in the world was sort of a validation for you to start thinking that maybe this doesn't have to be a side thing. I can fully jump into this. While you hold on to that thought, I'll go to Robert. So, JP Morgan, how long were you working, and were you cooking this idea of running, like social business on the side, or what was that triggering point for you to make that jump?
Sure, yeah. I think whenever I get asked this question, I always struggle because there's never been a triggering moment for me. It's always been a gradual kind of build up. I only worked at JP Morgan for a year, and it was it was a year because, like, frankly speaking, if I left before a year, I would have to give back my signing bonus. But that's like my non-press answer. I think, I think for me, the buildup was slow, right? Like, we started rescuing La Cuisine while we were seniors in college. And we just wanted to kind of expand it beyond the borders of NYU. And as we brought on 5 new restaurants and started working with them. And it was challenging because we were working at different banks and we had a lot of obligations. But on nights and weekends, we would meet and we would just work on this. And it just kind of became a real thing as we worked on it. So we went from 5 restaurants to 25, and at that point we had interns but no office. So we met at 270 Park right here at our offices, and on weekends we would have the interns come in to JP Morgan, and they would get their assignments and then work throughout the week. It was insane. And then that's when we realized we really did need a part-time person, full-time person. And people always ask, like, how did you pay yourself, or did you pay yourself? Did you not pay yourself for a year or two? I always did pay myself, and I think people really should kind of figure out the tangible and realistic aspects of quitting their job before doing something like this. So it was about a year, and then I left.
But tell us a little bit more about that, because I think what makes both of you a little different from, other people who have a stable, secure job and then jumping into entrepreneurship. Their end goal at some point is exiting or making a lot of money or getting a lot of investment selling their service and products. But you guys don't operate with that type of mindset, right? Your end goal is social cause, is social good, right? So I think there needs to be something more than the idea of a financial rewards at the end, right? So for you, just making that jump, I'm sure it was like, you make it sound like it was a casual transition, but I'm sure, having come from, the story, your background story of your tough childhood and your immigrant parents.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely like I considered it like very thoroughly, and I did a bunch of projections of my my own cash, and like showed my parents like, hey, I'm gonna still be able to give you payments and help you pay rent and all that stuff. And my parents didn't speak to me for like 6 months after I quit.
Really?
I remember I quit in July in 2014. And then during Thanksgiving, my brother was like, "Oh my God, it's gonna be the most awkward Thanksgiving ever." And I went to Thanksgiving, and we talked about everything but my job. And it's similar to your story in terms of once we started getting recognition on CNN and other things, they started bragging, and I was like, "What's going on? Why are you talking about me as if I exist now?" But it was a hard transition in terms of making sure that it would work. But there was a lot of work beforehand that went into making sure that it would work.
Gotcha.
And now I forget the second part of that question.
Well, I'll come back to you, because I do want to know the metrics behind how you guys actually operate financially. But Celina, so you jumping into full-time career coaching, podcast host, and an array of other things, but you now focusing on just 2-3 things.
So I think there were points in my life when I wondered why I've done so many random things, right? Like I've worked in finance and corporate law. I've written a book, started a community, started a podcast. And I was so confused about myself. And I was like, why can't I just stick with one thing like everybody else, just do finance or law or whatever. And then, because, when you go to a reception or networking party, be like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, I don't know how to answer that because it's very complicated, right? And by the way, I mean, who even likes their own answers to those questions? And I do remember there were times when, when I was with Ropes and Gray or Merrill Lynch, I could just say, I'm Celina from Ropes and Gray or Merrill Lynch, and no more questions, right? But then, and for some period after, when I was no longer affiliated with those brand name firms, I was like, oh my God, am I not as legit as I used to be? And then that was a very scary moment for me, because if I'm going to place my sense of self-worth only if I'm doing something that other people think is good, only when I'm part of a big organization that other people approve of, I'm never going to be happy, because external things you cannot control, right? So then I decided I gotta have the courage to do my own thing. And then I was reflecting back on my life, and I was like, I've done so many random things that seem to be so unrelated to each other. But I found a common theme. And all the things I've done, the things that brought me the most joy, all had common themes of people and stories. And it was a very eye-opening moment for me. That was my book and the podcast, all the talks that I give. And then I even remember some of my experiences from my childhood years where it was very, very evident, very transparent that like my gift was always in listening to people and encouraging them and really supporting them. But I had ignored all of it to pursue the societal definition of success. So like, for example, I told you that we moved back to Southern California when I was in 7th grade, and my parents moved to a really good school district. So that way I would be, like be able to go to a really good high school. But I got bullied all the time. It was like such a terrible, like traumatic experience. So I told my parents, I don't want to go to high school with these people who like know my past, even though by the time I was entering into high school, I had learned English by then, right? So my parents moved to a school neighborhood right next to it. And it was like a terrible school district. I think it's okay now, but back then it was brand new. It was not a good school. So bad that all the Korean parents who lived in that neighborhood would change their address and send the kids to the high school where I was supposed to go to. So basically my shot of going to good school was like very, very low, to a point like all my mom's friends were like really worried, like, oh, is this a good move? And even my high school teachers like, oh, you're never going to get into like an Ivy League or whatever. So I felt like my dream of, going to good school, including MIT, was like,
shut down.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why I got in, one of the big reasons why I got in was back then MIT required all the students who were applying, high school students who were applying, to have an interview with someone who graduated from school, right? And the person who interviewed me was, I still remember him, he was an aerospace engineer. And he we're just talking about his career path, whatever. And then he really didn't like his job and he didn't know what he wanted to do next. So I was just like asking him questions about his background, listening to his stories and encouraging him, brainstorming ideas, like maybe you could do this, you could do that. And then we just talked, and it was like 4.5 hours long. And my poor dad was waiting outside in the car. And to this day, he said he had to get very creative to go to the bathroom. And we started an interview during the middle of the day. And then when the interview ended, it was like completely dark, and I was super shocked. And I didn't have a lot to talk about myself because I was a high school student, right? It was all about him. And I was just listening to him. And then after, he wrote me a letter to say thank you. And then I got in. So back then, I think I kind of like brushed it off as like some funny incident. But later on, when I started my coaching school, the first day of coaching school, I felt like I came home. It was like such a weird feeling. Like I felt like I was wearing, for the first time, clothes that was so comfortable for me that I could just do this and be myself. And I didn't know I was so uncomfortable in my other job until kind of like, I think it's same thing with relationship or profession. Like you just feel at home, like there's certain level of comfort. It just feels right? So I experienced that in my first day of coaching school. Then I remember, oh my God, like even in high school, I was a coach to him, I was like a career coaching him, right? So I think if so many people come to me like, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but if you actually really pay attention to your life and really honestly like kind of assess, and this is hard to do it alone, which is the job of a coach and all of that. There is a certain running theme about everybody has gifts and talents that you're born with, but people who are able to utilize that and make it into profession will just achieve amazing things. But people who suppress it and tell themselves they can't because, oh my God, I just should work in finance or law, you're never going to get there. So that's something that I really learned the hard way.
I see. So do you work full-time now as a career coach?
Yeah. So I work as I have, so career coaching is a big part of what I do. I obviously do podcasts and also growing Givandre in my community. And something that I really learned as a coach, working as a career coach, is that maybe it's okay for me to share this as a Korean American community. Almost all my clients are Caucasians. It's very shocking to me. when I decided to become a coach, because I just know so many Korean Americans, I thought majority of my clients would be Korean American. I don't have a single Korean American client. And this was a very, very big shock to me, because when I give talks, I give lots of talks. And when I give talks in front of, I guess, non-Korean audience, I don't really have to explain what coaching is. And they all come to me, they hire me. My clients range from anywhere from early 20s to 60s. And then some of them make a lot of money, some of them don't. Like, some are very early in their careers, but they'll come to me and say things like, I would rather invest in my future than buy a Prada bag. And I was very shocked, because in my early 20s, I had no idea what I was doing. And this is why it was such a surprise, because I think for Korean Americans, because we come from immigrant families, our parents emphasize the importance of education. So they spend a lot of money on hagwon, so we study for SATs. Then a lot of us get into really good schools. And then we maybe get a good first job, good second job, right? And I think then we think that we made it, right? And I was like that too. And I was like spending unnecessary money on things that I didn't need to buy. I didn't really know how to invest in my future. I think this is why white people win at the end, because 10, 20, 30 years later, who's the founder, who's the partner, who's CEO, right? Almost cocky, all of them white, right? And I do think there's obviously a racism that plays a factor, but I experience a significant difference in the way that Caucasians prepare for their future, because the way that they come to me is very, very different. Like they say, multiple occasions, they say, I want to invest in my future, then buy a Prada bag or whatever other expensive item. And they said, yeah, my parents told me to go hire a coach. All my friends do it. They brag it like it's a sign of privilege and wealth. And whereas I think Korean Americans, we just don't know how to figure out our next step. And this was something I actually didn't know. And I was that person who was buying brand name bags and doing things I had no idea what to do, right? So this is something that I really learned the hard way, and it was a big shock to me.
I guess a good opposite example is the Roberts case, right?
Yeah.
You sort of figured it out by yourself. As a result, partly because of your upbringing, partly as a result of your college experiences and whatnot. So now you work full-time as a social entrepreneur yourself. How do you support yourself? Is the number justifiable?
For sure. And I think, that's what I'm biased, obviously, coming from NYU Stern, but I just feel like every nonprofit should also have some kind of earned revenue. And it's just like college, right? You pay tuition, you go, you pay admission to go to a museum, and et cetera, right? So for us, what we do is we basically provide a service. We don't eat the food. We don't benefit from the food. We provide a service that allows the food donor partner to get enhanced tax deductions, but also reduce their food disposal costs and get other intangibles such as branding and advertising, as well as foot traffic. So the way it works is essentially there's a IRS incentive where food donors like restaurants and catering companies, even offices like JP Morgan, can get up to 50% back from enhanced tax deductions. So they can essentially make money by donating food. It's kind of insane. And for some of our partners like Kind Snacks, they get hundreds of thousands of dollars back. Even small mom and pop stores like Baz Bagels in Soho, they got $30,000 back. And so essentially we can charge them, we charge just a flat rate, $20 per pickup, and essentially allow for our services to be basically much more reliable than other nonprofits, because everyone's incentives are aligned, right? When we miss a pickup, we feel it, and we know that is tied to our existence, and we're able to kind of provide a level of service that other nonprofits may not care about, because they can just fundraise and continue to exist by fundraising. Not that that's bad. I think it's just aligning the incentives and allowing for organic growth allows us to make this concept of food rescue more universal and allow it to be the actual solution rather than just another thing that food establishments can just do. So for us, We've been growing as fast as we can. So I went full time in 2014, so it's been about 5 years now, and we're still a pretty small team. We're at 8 full-time staff members. We're in 16 cities, rescuing about 1 million pounds of food every year. Yeah, we're trying to see if we could kind of invest more in our technology and get to a little bit more efficiency so that we can bring our next wave of food donor partners. The way I see it is kind of similar to like a for-profit startup in terms of getting our seed round from JP Morgan and friends and family. Before I quit, I made sure to kind of set up the relationship with JP Morgan to get some funding before leaving, and then looking at our kind of incubation period at Robinhood Foundation and Blue Ridge Labs as kind of our Series A, and then looking at our next step as our kind of Series B, really. So it's kind of we're trying to mirror ourselves in that kind of structure to also tell the story in terms of this is where your money is going and this is the growth that it'll spur, rather than this is the money that will continue to let us operate.
It might be a technical question, and I'm sure you guys are curious, but was there like a strategic decision behind operating your business under nonprofit versus a for-profit company?
Yeah. I mean, I always kind of want to make it clear, like you can do the same things as a nonprofit as a for-profit. I mean, one of the biggest employers in New York City is a nonprofit, and really it's a decision based off of business factors, right? So for us, we went to our food donor partners and basically interviewed them. This was kind of mandatory for our case competition, but essentially we asked them a ton of questions, and one of them was, would you work with us if we were for profit, like a B Corp? And all of them said no, because they were afraid that that we would turn around and sell the food. And so it was more about kind of building that trust around our food donor partners and the parties that we rely on to make our business model work. So yeah, there's always been kind of, I guess, opportunities for us to kind of switch over to a for-profit side. But in terms of how we operate and for what we're doing and our goals in terms of making it universal and for every single restaurant to be doing this, we think the nonprofit option is the best option.
Okay. I want to open it up to the floor, but before I do that, I just have one more question. Some of you guys might know, I was working, some of my past colleagues are here actually, so I'm careful, but I was working as an attorney in-house at a Korean government agency based in Manhattan. But I went to Cuba, and then I ran into Korean descendants in Cuba. So I quit my job, and then I've been working on making a documentary for the past years. My questions to you guys, just to pick up on your insights and wisdom, is what happens once your passion dies, right? So what happened was I was so gung-ho about telling the story. My passion was, going through the roof. And you're also empowered by the sense of meaning that I want to tell the story, but what happens is you hit reality relatively soon, and I had nothing left. My passion was completely gone because I was really having a hard time with the creative process. And all you're left with is grit, sense of responsibility, right? So I wonder if you guys ever face those moments where, wow, like it's not really driven truly by this energy, but it's more out of responsibility and grit. So how do you overcome those stages? And
Yeah, it's a great question. I think everyone kind of runs into that in terms of it's not just a fun thing. And I think a lot of my friends kind of, especially at JP Morgan, once I quit my job, they were like, "Oh my God, that sounds so much like so much fun, and I want to do that." And I think it's hard. I guess it's easy to play up the easier elements and harder to kind of talk about kind of how much work is put in beforehand, right? In terms of like doing all the projections and making sure it works and proving that there is a market out there, and all the legwork that needs to be done beforehand. I think I definitely kind of there are moments in time where it's like, oh my God, like this is not going to exist tomorrow, or like like. And I think it's still better than kind of what I was doing at JP Morgan, only because at least I'm attempting to do it. And I think the passion element for me, because it built over time, it doesn't play as much of an element. Like
Sure.
it's definitely personal to me because of kind of my background and kind of the realities of like there are people who are food insecure and there's children who are skipping meals when they really shouldn't be. That make it really kind of personal to me. But it's not. It never was a driving factor. It was more of a kind of melding of an intellectual and emotional thing that made it almost common sense for me to do it. And so I never felt almost kind of that giddy excitement around doing this. It was more, it felt like, this was a
Purpose.
logical, progression of my career.
No fear of missing out.
Not yet, at least.
yet,
I think,
okay.
I mean, I think, I think the only last thing that I wanted to say was with the grit and the kind of responsibility of doing it, it's easy to burn out. And I see a lot of fellow entrepreneurs who really are like super driven and like working really, really hard. And at JP Morgan also, you kind of work long hours and you kind of get used to it. But also when you do that for passion, it's, I think, harder because it's higher highs, lower lows. And when it's your thing, it's more personal to you. And then I think one of the things that I've kind of learned was really kind of making sure that I do have a balance and making sure that I don't spend too much time on RLC and also expecting my staff and my full-time employees to not, to take days off, to not go crazy, not work on weekends, and, actually maintain a healthy balance to make sure that this is a long-term solution rather than let's
see,
just
a
get
passion
this done
project.
and then sell the company.
Right, I see.
Yeah.
Celina.
I can totally understand why you would ask that question. I've learned that in order to do what you love, you have to do a lot of what you hate. So I love sharing stories, which is why I wrote the book and I, started a podcast. But in order to write the book, you actually have to do interviews and get rejected and reach out to people and all of that. Even with the podcast, I've been sharing a new episode every week, and it's a lot of hard work. And there are days when I'm like, oh my God, I like really I don't even know what to talk about on this episode. I'm like, I don't want to create another episode. And the other day I was like thinking, oh my God, this is supposed to be fun. Like my mom always reminds me, you have no right to complain because you're doing this because you wanted to do it. I'm like, that doesn't mean it's like always easy. It's actually harder because like at least with job and school, like someone tells you to do something and then everybody else is doing it with you.
Right.
But like the nature of creative work and entrepreneurs, like you have to be so self-disciplined and push yourself, right? So it's definitely hard, and work does become a routine, right? Maybe the first few months of starting the podcast was so exciting because I like every week I would see listeners from new countries I've never heard of, and that was like really exciting. And now it has kind of become like a normal thing, and it doesn't necessarily excite me anymore, which is like, oh my God, like what's wrong with me, right? So I think constantly reminding myself why I'm doing what I'm doing and why did I start it at the first place, right? And I decided to do what I do now because after like interviewing so many people for my book and the podcast, and just through my career transitions, I had the privilege of meeting so many successful people. And then I saw a common theme of people who are very successful and very fulfilled at what they do. And it was that they really love what they did. They like what they did. And then they were very good at it. And then most importantly, they found what they do to be meaningful. So once I've kind of recognized that pattern, every time I've been presented with career opportunities, I've always test to see if it meet all of them. I've been presented with opportunities where like it would meet 2 out of the 3, but not 3 out of the 3. So that's why I decided I have to just do my thing. And podcasts and career coaching and my community, Give Undream, writing a book, sharing stories, all meet that. So every time like I'm like, oh my God, I really don't want to create another podcast. I remind myself, this is supposed to be fun, and this is what I'm meant to do in my life. And nothing's easy. Like it's not going to be fun all the time because it becomes a routine, right? And like one of the person that I interviewed on my podcast, his name is Michael Kim. He's the founder of a law firm called Cobra & Kim. This episode was incredibly popular, went completely viral. Everybody should listen to it. People said it has like changed their lives. And he actually told me, it was so popular that I did a second interview with him very recently. at the very end, he talked about this. He said, a lot of people ask me like why I'm so successful, and he's an incredibly successful person. And he said, the reason why I was able to achieve anything in my life is because not because I was relying on passion, but it was a systematic behavior. He said, your passion anywhere, depending on your nature, it will die either 3 days or 6 months from now. If you're relying on your passion to motivate you to do the work, like you can't, like your passion will die. But then you have to create a systematic behavior where you're engaging in a certain activity every single day. And just doing it, even though your passion is not there and you don't feel like doing it. And in the end, the reason as to why you wanted to start in the first place, it will actually make you very happy once you're able to achieve it. So I think that's just the nature of entrepreneurship and, just nature of doing the things, creative pursuits. Yeah.
Beautiful. No, that was a perfect answer.
Okay, we're gonna wrap up actually. So thank you so much everyone for coming. All the events actually are available to take place with your support. So if you haven't joined our membership, please feel free to join. I'm the development officer, so you can talk to me. And thank you so much again for sharing your
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
passion and everything.